Is there a bad character to learn exit with?
Potemkin.
Rev 2 is known for its incredibly mechanically diverse roster and powerful system mechanics, so I must ask, is there anyone who is poorly suited for learning how to play the game? Doesn't everyone have enough character-specific gimmicks that it's impossible to say who's good and bad for something like learning how to play?
Yeah, basically. Let's talk about this. So, one, when someone says that something like that, right? Oh, this character is bad for learning how to play Guilty Gear. What they're usually doing is calling you a scrub. And they're like, oh, you're just playing this character. You don't actually know how to play Guilty Gear. But no character plays Guilty Gear. Every character plays a different chunk of Guilty Gear. So like, as an example, a lot of Guilty Gear involves run pressure. Hi, puppy. Running up to someone, pressing some buttons, figuring out the situation on block, maybe running up and doing it again. Potemkin can't run. That's a pretty big part of the game that Potemkin's just not playing. Also doesn't have an air dash, so you can't play that part of the game. So Potemkin probably plays the smallest chunk of Guilty Gear out of everyone in Guilty Gear. But Potemkin has to IB a lot in order to create offensive opportunities out of defense, right? That chunk of the game, Potemkin and Potemkin players are going to work on a lot more heavily upfront than other characters who will still have to learn that chunk of the game eventually, but will often do so much later because their character pushes them to learn different things in a different order. And that tends to be how I describe this kind of thing. Guilty Gear is a vast space, and no one character is playing the entirety of Guilty Gear. Some characters will play more, right? Chipp, for example, has a lot of different tools. I, as a Chipp player, get to choose which chunks of Guilty Gear I want to play in any given moment. And that means I get to play a lot of the game, but it also means that I don't necessarily have to play it as deeply. For example, because Chipp has so many movement tools, I do not need to worry as much about my opponent catching on to which movement tools I'm using and anticipating where I'm going to be in the future, because I can always just bust out a different one. And if I'm playing Sol, well, Sol's vectors of approach and methods of approach are much more limited than Chipp's, so I'm going to have to play a game of multiple layers of movement. I'm going to have to use FD more, FD breaking more, or maybe wire-seeing some of my specials for more movement options, or play with more subtleties around how deep I run or how long my block strings go in order to create the kind of outcomes that I need to get out on my opponent. Both characters are still playing Guilty Gear, and they're obviously playing very different chunks of Guilty Gear. Some will play broader, some will play deeper, but I wouldn't say that any one character is good or bad at learning how to play the game, because no one is really playing the game in quite the same way. The effect that has on us as players is that we learn the game in these really interestingly different shapes. So I think I hit 4,000 hours on Steam, and I don't even know how many hours I have on PlayStation, just for Xrd alone, not counting XX or anything. At my level of play, what I notice is that players are good or bad at a whole wide range of different subsets of Guilty Gear skills. Fu is amazing at instant blocking because motherfucker's a Potemkin player and also use that a lot for Heian. I am not as good as IBing, but I've been getting better at it because it's the thing I know I need to work on. The thing that I usually work on the most as a Chipp player, funnily enough, is a lot of my footsies, which I bring over from Street Fighter. So other fighting games also influence the way I play Guilty Gear. But you'll find a lot of players, let's say, I won't call it complaining. They're very complimentary about how good I am at landing chips 2D in neutral because I am willing to wait a little bit and look for a whiff punish opportunity instead of just running in and pressing buttons and seeing what happens. And that's something that I learned from Street Fighter and from CBS2, not necessarily from something from Guilty Gear. There's so much Guilty Gear to learn that all of us learn things in different order. And sometimes we learn it because our character pushes us to learn this thing up front. I think of Sol, for example, as a very fundamentals Guilty Gear character because Sol has to play a lot of strike throw involving air dashing or ground dashing to get it. And that's kind of like this core Guilty Gear element that most characters engage with to some extent. It's not an aspect of the game that I personally had developed that heavily until I actually started playing Sol myself to work on that, because I knew I needed to get better at it, but I also wasn't quite sure how I can do that with Chipp. Like, it felt weird at first to run in as much and play like throw games with Chipp when he doesn't really get that much off his throw. But I knew I needed to do it as a player to get better, and so I actually played Sol for a little bit to better understand how that part of the game works. It's not that a character is good or bad for learning gear, it's that different characters will push you to learn different things in different orders, and you can take different characters to learn different parts of the game yourself and then bring it back to your main character, or even play other games to get a similar effect, which I think is really cool. That's one of the things I love about fighting games. I think of them as weight training for the brain, and different characters in different games are basically different exercises or different workouts or different training programs that do different things to you. So at various points in my fighting game career, especially in Xrd, I've had different moments where I'm like, oh, I should work more on using this tool. I remember there have been revelations after like a Frosties or a Combo Breaker where I'm like, I should learn how to use Find Me more, or I should learn how to slow down. That's actually a big one for me, because in bracket, I'll get nervous. When I get nervous as Chipp, I move fast. And when I move fast, I usually move fast into getting counter hit into 6p or something, and then I die. And so one thing that actually helped me with that specific problem was I started playing plus R more. And this last Frosties, I actually, even though I don't play plus R that much as a rule, I did more in the last couple of years, but I kind of put it aside to focus on Xrd. But I'll pick it up every now and then. And what I find is that because I'm less comfortable with the game, and I don't have as much of the advanced combos or set play or high execution stuff that gives Chipp his damage, when I play plus R, I need to have really good neutral. I need to really focus on looking at the screen. I need to interact with my opponent's movement and attack options. I can't use YRC slowdown to just say, hey, it's my turn now. And because of that, it forces me to really focus and slow down how I play the game in order to get the hit so that I can win. And even though I don't play plus R that much, playing plus R helped me apply that mindset and focus to Xrd, and that really helped me focus on doing the things that I needed to do and play at kind of a slower, more reactive, more tournament-friendly game at Frosties this year, and I did really well in both games. I'm super happy with that. So I generally recommend that people play a whole bunch of different games and a whole bunch of different characters so they can broaden their understanding of fighting games, not just Guilty Gear, but fighting games in general, and really bring their kind of complete whole like complicated selves to each game. There's another example of this actually, which comes to mind, and it was the first Combo Breaker after quarantine, and Hotashi had just come by to play some casuals, and I hadn't gotten a chance to play Hotashi in Xrd in a long ass time. So I sat down, played some games with him, and I remember thinking, actually, I told him this, is like, last time we played, I wasn't good enough to appreciate how good his L-Felt was in ways that no other L-Felt was good. And he looked at me and he told me, yeah, that's what happens when you spend years trying to make your L-Felt look different from everybody else's. So that was a specific goal that Hotashi had in mind, and that's how he refined like his excellent command of the sniper stance, right? Which most other L-Felts do not use to the same degree that Hotashi does, even still, right? Years after Hotashi's, presumably hit his peak in Xrd and go on to do great things in Strive and whatever, other L-Felt players do not use that toolset the way that Hotashi does. And it's entirely due to the focus and the motivation that he had while he was practicing. So for me, I think it's really cool that Guilty Gear players can kind of take all different shapes and sizes, and that the game is so complex that you get to learn a bunch of different stuff and eventually become a very uniquely shaped player. But that comes from often spending a lot of time, a lot of different characters, spending a lot of time just meditating constantly on your own character and finding different angles or different sources of inspiration and playing other fighting games. I wouldn't say that any character is good or bad for learning Guilty Gear. You'll just learn stuff in different orders. And whoever told you that probably thinks you're a scrub, and you can send them this video.